All right, guys, we're gonna go over some framing stuff today. So we're gonna start with how we're loading the truck, what tools we've got with us. We're gonna go over how we select lumber at Home Depot, and then we're gonna get into how we actually do the framing itself, how we think through layout, what we're going over with the stuff that we have in the space. So we'll start with the truck. We've got our pack out kits in the back of the truck. We've got our framing box with the additional, more specific framing tools in there. We've got our fold out table because as of right now, I don't usually like to work with framing bags on me as much. So I like to have a spot where I put my tools in my immediate work area. We've got saw horses so that we're not working down low as much. We can have our lumber set up a little bit more at waist height and work here. It's a little more comfortable. Ladder, mini scaffold. We've got the vacuum because we're starting this job, and then the trash can, same thing. We like to keep those on site for all our jobs. We've got brooms, shovel, we've got levels, we've got the laser level in the truck, all that good stuff. So a lot of times we're going to be ordering a lumber package to the house. It's easier that we don't have to be loading it ourselves. Also saves us some time. We don't always get to control how straight our lumber is when we do that, unfortunately, but it's kind of the trade-off for, is it easier for them to get the lumber to the house, or are we going to get a higher percentage of straighter lumber? So anyways, we're going to go over how we choose our lumber, and then it'll even affect how we do stuff on the job site. But we're going to be picking up our stuff today, so we'll reshuffle it, load it in there, and then get to the job site and go over what we've got. So we'll stop by Home Depot next, go over how we select our stuff, and then get rolling from there. See you in a second. All right, guys, let's talk about selecting lumber. So if we have a lumber package dropped on the job site, or if we're selecting our own lumber, one of the things we want to do is double check, make sure that the lumber is straight. We don't want it to curve at the end, and we particularly don't want it to be twisted. If it's twisted, then our walls are going to be all jacked. If it's curved, it's a lot harder to work with. Sometimes you can kind of shove it into the spot that you need, or block it into the place, or you can cut off the end of it if you need to. But if you can just get straight lumber, you don't even have to do any of that. So double check that it's straight. There you go. And usually in a stack, when you find a run of straight studs, I'm assuming these next couple are going to be straight as well. I always check them. Now, where's our crappy one? We had one that we were looking at right here. I'll have Ethan try and look down this stud right here. So you can see how it bows, and it has just a slight twist to it. It's mostly got the bow. We don't want this one. So when you're doing that, take this bad boy, try and neatly throw it in the back of the stack. Keep searching for all those straight guys, get the amount of studs that you need, and then head out to the job site. All right, guys, let's start talking about how we're going to do some of this layout, counting studs, stuff like that. So we're in a loft area of a house that is going to be converted into a bedroom. So we're going to have a wall that is right here with a door in it that's going to open right here. And then this is going to be our closet over here. So we're going to need the cutout for our pass-through right here. We're going to need a cutout for our door right here. And then we'll walk through real quickly how we did our layout. So we're going to skip some of this drywall stuff, how we opened some of it up and different things. That's going to be something for another time. But for this, it's non-load bearing. So we're going to go 24 inches on center with our studs. But we're going to have a door right here. So that's going to change our layout a little bit. We're also going to be doing a stand-up framing on this wall and more of a stick framing on this wall to show you the two different techniques that we can use. So over here, as we start laying out our tape measure, we got all 8-foot studs with us today. Now, you can get 10-foot studs, 12-foot studs, so you can just cut this and you're not going to have to deal with one of the things we have to deal with. But when you're doing larger framing, you will have to deal with this, so it's a good example for us to talk about it. If I have an opening that's a little more than 11 feet and my studs are only 8 feet long, that means I'm going to have a seam right here at 8 feet. And we're going to show you how to deal with that. So first, let's start talking about this wall that's going to be over here and how we do our layout. So we're going to have a stud at 0. We'll have a stud at 24, but then we want to have our door over here. So this is what we're going to do. We know that our closet the end of the stud is going to be at 28 and roughly a quarter. We need 1/2 inch for drywall, so that's going to give us 28 and 3/4. We're going to go 6 inches over to the edge of our rough opening for the framing. The rough opening is the framed opening, not the finished opening, which would have either drywall, the door, a finished material like tile or anything like that on there. So the rough opening. The rough opening is going to be 6 inches over. So 28 and 3/4 plus 6 inches is going to be 34 and 3/4. I'm going to have a jack stud and a king stud. Those are terms that we're going to get into a little bit later once we lay it all out. We'll have a header over the top of us, and then we're going to jump over to the other side of this. When you're framing a door, you want whatever the size of your door is, you need your rough opening to be 2 inches bigger. So in this case, we're having a 30-inch door, so we need to have a 32-inch opening, 32 inches wide. And then we should have it 80 inches tall, so we should be 82 inches on the height. You might think only 81, but we give them the 2 inches up top. Anyways, so where does that put us? So we went from 34 and a half. We need to add 32, so that gives us 66 and 3/4. We have jack stud, king stud, so that gives us another 3 inches. And then we're going to resume our layout because we're doing 2-foot layout. If we're just building a wall, it'd be 0, 2 feet, 4 feet, 6, 8, 10, so on and so forth. You can count by 2. So we get back to, we have a stud at 6 feet, and then we come to here at 8 feet. What we're going to do is, since we're going to be standing this up, and we'll show you when we start putting the wall together, is we're not going to set this stud in until we've stood up this part and anchored it, and then we've stood up this part and anchored it, and this is going to span the middle. The other way to do it is you'll put your stud, instead of being on the far side of 96, on the inside of 96, and then you'll have extra studs right there. Why does this all matter? Because what we're going to be doing is we're working upstairs. We're going to be doing all of our cutting downstairs in this situation because it's a finished home. We need to know I've got one at 0, one at 2, one at a full height, which is going to be your king stud, at the 32 mark right there. I've got a 4th one just inside, was that like 69 and 3/4. I've got one at 72, 8 feet, 10 feet, and then the end of the wall. So I need to cut 8 full studs and then 2 jack studs for right there. So we'll go over jack studs, king studs here in a second, and I might, well, this might be after you've already seen the jack stud, king stud thing, so we'll probably have the wall set up. We're working backwards in time now, so we'll probably have already had the video where we explain jack studs, king studs once the wall's already built, and that brings us to now. Anyways, so we've got our jack studs, king studs here, header up top, and then we'll do the same thing for that wall, but we're going to build that one a little differently to show you the 2 different techniques that you guys can use for that. So we're going to build this wall on the floor and then stand it up. Now, if you're smart, you might be thinking, well, if this is flat and our measurement, which is 96 and 7/16, is nice and tight up there, what happens when I'm trying to turn it and it's at an angle and now we're larger than that 96 and 7/16? There's a little trick that you can do, and this is non-load bearing framing, so it's only applicable in non-load bearing framing. Only applicable in non-load bearing framing is you can cut your studs 5/16 of an inch short. Okay? So that way, when you're standing it up, it can slide up in there. If this were load bearing and we need everything really tight, we'd be doing the next technique that we're going to show you guys. That's why we're showing you both of them. If you don't have anything on top, obviously you can just do stand-up framing. It turns out to exactly what you want. Moving on. So right now, we went through and measured, and one of the ways that we can cheat this is, instead of trying to measure on what's called the curve of the tape measure, because I'm trying to measure up and it doesn't come to a flat end. You see how the tape measure is curved up there? Well, what we can do is, a lot of times guys will measure down to 10 inches, make a mark, and then measure from the other side. That's a little further up there. So in this case, I measured down to 30 inches. I make a little mark on the wall. Then I measure up. I get 66 and 7/16. So I need to add 66 and 7/16 plus my 30. That's 96 and 7/16 all the way to the top. Now, do I run outside and cut my 8-foot studs, which are 96 inches, to 96 and 7/16? That's a joke for all of you who don't understand math. No, what you're going to do is you need to account for your top plate and your bottom plate. And those are going to be 1.5 inches each, which means I take 96 and 7/16. I take 3 inches off of that. That's now 93 and 7/16. Okay, but we're starting on the floor and we're going to be tilting it up. So what does that mean? Like we just said, we need to take 5/16 off of our studs. So our studs now need to be 93 and 1/8 for in here. We counted, we have 8 full-size studs that are going to be going in here, and those need to be cut at 93 and 1/8. Now, if I go over here and I measure down to 30 and then I measure up, oh, that's beautiful right there. And then I come over to this side of the wall and I measure down 30 and then I measure up, oh, it's the same thing as over there. Am I good to go? No. Why? Because these guys could have dorked up the roof. The trusses could have been a little weird. The framers could have been having a day when they did it. Or the drywallers could have made humps in the wall. So what do? We're going to go through. And yes, this is measuring on the roll of the tape measure. But we're going to start looking, okay, we want to pretend like if I were to cut the tape measure and roll it the rest of the way, where is that going to be? Because right now you can't really see it, but my tape measure is touching more at like 96 and 5/8. But I know from experience that's not the case because it's at a curve. Shortest distance between two spots is a straight line. A curve is longer. So that means if I were to cut it, and this is based off of experience, it's going to be 96 and a little longer than 1/4 or a little shorter than 1/2. Okay, what does that come to? Our 96 and 7/16. Now we go and we check it again. Where are we at? Okay, same thing. And then we go and we check where we're at. Oh, okay, same thing. In this case, we got lucky. It's the same thing all the way through. If there was variation in the ceiling, it might be easier to either stick frame it, or what you do is as long as it's within like 1/4, you cut to the shortest dimension and you frame to that. If I cut to the largest dimension, I'm gonna have a spot that I'm trying to beat into place and just be scuffing the drywall, and I might not want to be redoing that drywall there. Follow what I've been saying so far? All right, then we're gonna go take a break. We're gonna start cutting a bunch of our studs, and we have a video on some of the techniques with cutting wood, so we're not really gonna get into it. You're gonna trust us that we go and we cut our studs correctly. On the sawhorses downstairs, we'll bring it up here, and then we'll show you guys how we're framing it on the floor, what we're doing with that, and then go from there. We also have a video on layout, so we're not gonna get into that too much, but we'll be back in just a second. All right, guys, we wanted to take a quick break. We're jumping ahead. You'll see the walls up right now, but we need to explain something called king studs, jack studs, and headers. And they're very important because we need to be able to understand how to transfer load correctly and make it where things aren't going to be sagging, particularly if we have a door or a window that it could compromise whatever we put in there. Or if someone's walking through and you didn't build it correctly, then it could come down on someone, it's bad, all that good stuff. So we start with a header. We don't just have a 2x4 that's turned sideways. There are different kinds of headers. This is called a sandwich header. You can get beams that are pure wood, that there's no filling in the middle or no gap in the middle. There's LVLs, all that stuff, but we're gonna leave that for another video. Essentially, for what you need to know right now, a header is gonna be a larger piece of wood or orientation of wood that can carry more load than a single 2x4, 2x6 that is run, what is that on its side? Doesn't matter. Anyways, so to carry that though, we're going to carry that with a jack stud. So the header sits on the jack stud, and that is all closed in with a king stud. Now, if you're trying to remember which one's the jack stud, which one's the king stud, the king, who is the highest ruler, goes all the way to the highest point from our bottom plate to our top plate. The jack, he's almost there, but he's not as tall as the king, goes from the bottom plate to the bottom of the header. King stud on the outside, jack stud on the inside, header right here, okay? We talked about this being a sandwich header. We're gonna use that for another time. We're gonna look over at this window. Right here, this is the exterior of the house. So once again, we have drywall up, but this is a part of being able to kind of, what I talk about, being able to see through walls. So I know there is a header that is going across the top right here. I know there is a jack stud and then a king stud. Now we've got the drywall open right here. You see how I've got two studs right here? That's because I've got a jack stud and I've got a king stud. So I can start to look around at the rest of the windows that are in the house, and I can be able to know, okay, I've got two studs right there. I've got two studs all over on that window. Now, on some plans, they're gonna call for multiple king studs. They're gonna call for multiple jack studs, but that's a little more than what we're getting into on this video. But what you need to remember is you have a header that goes across the top, that goes across the head of the opening. A jack stud carries the header. The king stud runs from the bottom all the way to the top because he is the top of the mountain. The king is the top. Hopefully that makes sense. And then we're gonna jump into some of our layout, and then you'll see me all of a sudden realize that we're gonna film what you just watched later, and it's fun, it's hilarious. We'll see you in a bit. All right, I wasn't planning on showing you guys the layout, but whatever, we're here. So I like to line up my studs so that they're exact same, and then I'm gonna run it all the way out. So I like to mark X's where I've got a stud. So I've got a stud right after 0, crow's foot at 24, crow's foot at 24, and then we have it at 34 3/4, 34 3/4, and then I've got a stud here, and that's just because I can remember it with where our door's at, which pushes us to 66 3/4. There we are. There we are. And then we've got stud, 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 72. Mark my crow's foot. Mark my crow's foot. And then we've got 96, which we'll get to at the end. Pull this up, and then we're going to take our square, and a square covers two 2x4s. So you can, that's another reason why I like to do it at the same time or side by side, because you can get a little bit of efficiency. It's not a lot, but there's the little tips and tricks that add up as you go through a job. So, and then we've got 0 right there. All right, now we said we're gonna do our stand-up technique, and this video is not officially presented by the greatest tools out there in Milwaukee, but we love them dearly, like our own family. We have so much red, it's almost insane. Anyways, moving on. We've got framing nailers, also by Milwaukee. Screw boxes, also by Milwaukee. You could get DeWalt, but it's not as good, but it'll do. Anyways, back to being serious. So I don't want to flip this around. I want to take this directly down here, get it set up, slide my studs forward, slide my studs forward. Oof. Right there. All right. So first one is going to go right there. We'll slide that one over. And then we've got this one right. Oh, I forgot my X's. What am I doing? X right there. We've already got those. We've got those. X right here. And then half an X right there. And then we're going to pretend like I did the same thing on that side. You should always do it. I've done it enough. I know what I'm doing. You're going to watch me screw up because we're recording. It's going to be hilarious. And then you're going to be like, ha. Anyways. So this goes over here. These guys are my jack studs. Set those right in the middle. Got king stud. Got that guy ready to go. Then we'll take our nailer. Now, my rule of thumb for how many nails you need per stud that you do is you take the width of your wood, divide it by 2. So this is a 2x4, divide 4 by 2, you get 2. If it's a 2x8, 8 divided by 2 is 4. It gets 4 nails, 2x12, same thing, all that stuff. Now, every once in a while, I'll do divide by 2 plus 1, But if that's too hard for you to remember, divide by 2. That's how many nails you do. You'll be all right. Just don't miss. All right, now let's nail this puppy together. Keeping everything nice and tight. I want my joint and that to be nice and flush. Hand away, 'cause if there's a misfire and that nail shoots out, I don't want to hit my fingers. I kind of like them. Now, this guy right here, same thing. Line it up with the top, because if I'm letting it just be a little down, and right now we're on carpet, so it's really gonna have a lot of variation, but even on concrete, sometimes that bottom piece might be sticking down. This helps us keep everything in alignment. I've got my finger up top holding it steady. I shoot the bottom one first, then the top one. Now, I've got jack stud, king stud. I'm gonna use my jack stud to help me line up on that line. The other way to do it is measure 3 inches back and all that stuff, and it's wonderful and it's pretty and it's great and it's probably better, but right now this is what we're doing. So right there, bottom, top, good to go. That's right where we want it. Our jack stud is gonna be right where we want it. All right, now let's come over, do that same thing again. We are running out of space over here, so we're gonna shift everything down. Move. All right. What am I doing? This goes right here. So we'll get this out of our way. All that efficiency talk is going out the window. I've burned more than that already. Everyone is laughing in the comments section. I understand. I'm laughing at me too. All right, so everything's nice and lined up right there. If you're wondering whose house this is, it's a family member. That's why they're allowing us to do it. We put down plenty of protection. That's why we're doing the filming here. Anyways, so our jack studs are all set there. Last one we have over here is this guy. Line up, far side of the line, finger, making sure we're level. Bottom nail first, then top nail. Now, we have to come over here. Do the same thing. We'll push it all back that way now. All right. Let's line this up over here. And let's see, what do we got? There we go, there we go. Bam, bam, bam. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. All right, line up the top. Keep everything straight, make sure that edge is good. Bottom, top, finger away. Make sure it's nice and tight. Flush at the top. Bottom, top. You want to keep those fingers away. All right, here we go. Jack stud, king stud. So you can always move your king stud out of the way. Do jack stud first. The reason why we have that straight line from our square, you want your stud to be directly in line with it. That way we're king stud right there. Bottom, top, there we go. And then while we're here, we'll line up our jack studs, make sure everything's nice and flush. We're gonna tack it together. We'll come back through and nail it off in a little bit, but that way everything's nice and together when we stand everything up. So, all right, where are we at? Jack stud, king stud. Don't get distracted. Alrighty, alrighty. So let's do, like we said, jack stud first, bottom nail, finger away, nail it. It's repetition. It's the same thing over and over. Make sure everything's flush. Bottom, top, there we go. Make sure it's lined up straight with that line. Bottom, finger away. Oh, here's a way to cheat this. This is probably not safe. This has kind of a thing where if it pushes down and you're pulling the trigger when it's low on nails, you can't push it. But in this case, I need one more nail. So we're gonna ghost ride the whip. Disengage the safety. Bam, there we go. Now, oh, we might be 2 nails short, but let's see here. Ooh, it's trying to be slippy. Got her. All right, now we'll do a new rack of nails. Woo! Getting it in. Now we'll take our wall, stand her up, put her in. Before we do that though, then we'll do that later. We've got our header piece. Then we've got to record the video that you guys already saw about jack studs, king studs, headers, all that fun stuff. Anyways, now if we did our math right, I'm gonna look awesome. If we did it wrong, I'm gonna kind of look, you know. So, all right, now we can stand this bad boy up. Bring it right where we want her to be. Now, usually you're doing this with 2 people, but my 2 people is behind the camera. And I know how to work by myself. It gets lonely working by yourself, but you do it anyway. And it's fine, it's okay. Ta-da. All right, now that's up there. Now here's the secret to making sure that you can go grab your tool while this stays here. You look at it, you tell it, don't move. And everything's fine. That's a joke, do not do that. All right, we'll start at the bottom. Make sure everything's nice and tight. And just making sure that we're following the existing framing. Boom! All right, so the way that we're gonna lock this in laterally is essentially with this wall. We've got the floor and how this is gonna get locked in over here. So usually, or in a lot of cases, we might have to put blocking in between. This wall is gonna lock us in right here. And then we've got the top plate, bottom plate that's gonna lock us in over here. So this wall is gonna be nice and stable. It's not going anywhere. We're gonna nail it off to the floor. And then we'll be good. That's getting cut out. All right. Now, we're gonna take a break. Well, actually, we've got these guys right here, so we might as well throw them in. There are different headers, and hopefully we've already talked about this, so I'm gonna fast forward a little bit and then rewind because real time versus YouTube time, it gets very confusing. So, we said that this opening is for a 30-inch door, but it is, ooh, it might be a little tight, Ethan. We'll make it work. We have a 30-inch door. It needs to be 2 inches bigger for a rough opening. But then we have 2 jack studs. So these need to be 1.5 inches bigger on each side. So 32 plus 1.5 inches on each side is 3. So 35. Ho, 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 ho. There we go. All right. So we've already talked about the header for the video because we're working reverse time. I'm going to nail these in. You'll see what we're doing. And we'll go from there. So, flush that guy up. Nailed it. Let's go this way just because I want to. Bam. All right. Do the same thing to this side. Uh-oh. Fit. She's just barely tight. There we go. Now, one of the things that when you're shooting nails in, it tends to kick the stud whichever way. So if my gun is pointing
if my gun is pointing this direction and there's no stud nailed behind it, it's gonna have a tendency to push the stud that way. So sometimes you need to try and find a way to put back pressure without shooting your foot, your hand, whatever. So just be careful of that. You can also use it to your advantage though, because sometimes you've got a stud that's kicked out just a little bit, and you know that if you set that nail, sometimes it's gonna push it in that little bit. Use it to your advantage. So in this case, I'm gonna try and put back pressure back here, hold it, it's also snug. Boom, there we go. This one, sticking out a little bit, so I'm gonna want the gun to do its thing right where I want it. Now, there is debate on what is the proper way to do the blocking up here. For drywall, you need, you want 24 inches between your supports. That's why we have 24 inches on center right there so that the drywall can go up there. In this case, we could just say, I don't need any mid-span right here. Technically, we might want, I'm getting way too far into this. If we were to put a kicker here as an extra support, some people will say, well, you should follow your layout. So it'll be on the 24. Other people will say, you need to find the center and do it in the center. I'm more in the camp of doing it in the center because it's symmetrical, it looks better. Sometimes your layout lands like right here, and then you've got the additional stud right here. It looks weird. If you've got the correct support, do it in the middle. If you've got joists that are bearing down, sometimes I like to kind of just put them directly under the joists so that we've got the best bearing and transfer of weight possible. But in this case, we'll throw one in the center. So you're gonna believe me that I'm gonna go cut it, and then you'll see it when we come back from stopping the video that it'll be up there. You saw how we did this one. We'll come back when we're gonna stand up this piece right here and how we get this all connected together. So we'll see you in a second. All right, guys, now we're gonna show you the other way that we can do this. So we've got our bottom plate that has been nailed to the floor, and then we're gonna take this guy and put it up here and then connect it to the trusses that are running above the drywall. So in this case, what we did is we snapped our lines so we know where to run our stud, and then there are these small pencil hash marks on the ceiling that shows us where the trusses are. So I already preset a screw in this one because I knew where it was at. I'm gonna change the setting on my impact because it's not what I want. So now that's holding it there. It's essentially my second set of hands, and then we can do the rest of what we're looking to do. So we'll get it lined up inside of our nice red lines over here. Oh, come on. Right there. Then sink it. There we go. Ooh, I think she missed a little bit. That's right on there. So, all right, well, we'll double check that one. We'll cut to double check that one and go from there. We'll show you what we did when the camera was off. So we see where our wall is gonna land, and obviously this stud is gonna be able to provide backing for the drywall on this side, but we need to make sure we have backing for the drywall on this side as it turns the corner. The other thing, since we didn't just set it tight to this stud, to where it's right here, we want it to be right in the middle so that these two walls can be locked in together. So then we have these 4 walls in a square that are gonna be nice and locked in all as one and support itself as we go. So we're gonna get our screw adjusted, and then next what we're gonna do is start doing our layout on here, and then we'll start pulling measurements to start slipping these in, these studs in as we go. So we'll be back here in a second. All right, guys, we've got everything screwed off along the top, nailed off on the bottom. Now, when you're doing this, what you want to do is measure from the floor up to here. Now, earlier you heard me say, don't measure on the curve. Well, that's exactly why we set this guy up here first, because then we can run our tape measure all the way up and it runs past, so we're not measuring on the curve. We can look straight at it. Usually when you're doing this, you're gonna wanna be on your step ladder, the mini scaffold, whatever, so that you can be looking directly at your tape measure right there. Now, this usually works best one of two ways. Usually I'll have a little notepad with me. I'll measure it, write that measurement down, go to the next one, so on and so forth, and then I've got my cut list. I go cut all those studs, bring them in, lay them all out, and then usually I'll mark on the stud which measurement it is, and then you can start throwing them in. The other way is if you're working with a partner, you've got one guy who's calling out measurements, one guy who's cutting. The guy who's calling out measurements then goes back and nails while the other guy keeps cutting studs. So we went through and we cut all our studs. So this one goes right up against here. And usually these are going to be a little more snug. Ooh, I may have measured that one a little wrong. So let's see if I go 2 for 2 or what's happening. So we've got this guy in here, and then I should be able to just tap it over so it's nice and snug, right? If, like we talked about, if we're in a situation where it's load bearing, we don't want and we cannot allow any of that gap that we can have in a non-load bearing situation. And obviously I'm blocking the camera and this is just terrible for you guys to see anything that's happening. And then I like to put my foot behind, because we talked about how the nailer can kick it. Give that back pressure, bam. 1, 2. We said divide the width by 2 and sometimes add 1. And I told you if you can't do the math correctly, then ignore that. So that's why I did 3. So then we'll come up to the top, make sure everything lines up with our line right there. And then there we go. Now we're going to follow that all the way down. And we've drawn right here, we've got our 2 studs, king stud, jack stud, right? So we've got our king stud, shorter ones are jack stud, and we're going to continue to fill it in all the way. So that one, it's a little long, we'll shave it down, but it's one of those things that when you're trying to keep this one extremely tight, particularly like we said, load bearing situation, it's always best to have to shave it to get exactly right, because you can't float, like you can't have any of that gap in there. So it's better that we have to shave it than it being too short. So we're gonna fill these in and then we'll touch base with you guys to show you what it all looks like, talk about some additional blocking, and then some notes from our day, stuff like that. So that's the biggest thing though. You've got to get it secured to the top, secured to the bottom, and then measure individually, either write it out or be calling out with a partner your cuts and slamming them in. And so we'll pause the video for ourselves, but you'll see us here in just a second. All right, guys, so we got this one slid up. Now, typically when you're doing this, we have 8-foot studs and it's non-load bearing, so that's why I'm not stressing it too much. Usually you're gonna stagger your joints, and we have our joints right on top of each other. We're gonna add some extra blocking. So typically you'd have this joint that would be on this stud, and this joint would stay right there. That way it kind of locks it in a little better. We've got extra blocking, we're not gonna worry about it. It's just essentially hold drywall is what we're doing. So if we zoom in over here, we've got the seam between these 2 studs up here. So what we want to do is bring this over, line it up right there. And then because I'm vertically challenged, I use my step stool. And then 2 that way. 2 that way. Oh, shiner. So we'll beat that back and then redo it. And then we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. Jeez. right here. So 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, now we've got that guy nice and locked in right there. And then once we get this in over here, that's gonna help really lock our wall in and make sure everything's nice and tight, nice and snug. Now, last thing we didn't talk about, why do we have a stud that goes on the bottom of our doorway right here? Well, it's because when we're standing our wall up, we don't want the pieces to be swaying on us. It keeps everything nice and locked in. And then you can either take a multi-tool or a Sawzall, cut that out afterward, and we're good to go. All right, guys, we are all wrapped up. We've got a couple things to show you. So we've got this extra guy in right here because they're gonna be doing shelves. So this is about 13 inches. We'll do 16-inch shelves over here. It allows us to have blocking here, blocking here. We've already got a stud on the other side, so we're good to go. Over here, this is what's called ladder blocking. So our space between these two is like 25 inches. And instead of throwing a stud straight down the middle, we did ladder blocking. Sometimes, if we had a bigger gap between this stud right here, let's say it was further over, and then this was further over, instead of putting 2 studs on either side, we do ladder blocking across so they have drywall backing all the way down. So if someone says, hey, go do ladder blocking, that's what they want because it's like, I can climb my ladder. Anyways, all these guys are set in. We finished those out. You saw us throwing them in. We talked about jack studs, king studs, headers. Remember that because it's important. And then we ended up climbing the attic. That was a fun experience. And then we set blocks, one above this side and then one above this side because we got the seam right there. And then we ran 2 screws up there. So now this son of a gun is not going anywhere. So that is all set. And then we're set for the electrician to come in, do their stuff, but that's not the purpose of this video. Let's talk about mistakes before we've got one more real framing thing before we leave you with. Now, when you're laying stuff out on concrete or an unfinished floor, you can snap lines, do your thing, or if the floor is being demoed, that's great. Now, you may have noticed a hard pause when I was telling you about how we're cutting out the bottom plates earlier. Why was that? Well, it's because the carpet is supposed to stay where our bottom plate is currently. So, done screwed up. We're going to get the carpet replaced in here and get that done. But when you're doing it, if we were to be doing this again, if you're in this situation, if the flooring is staying, you do need to account for, okay, we got to cut those bottom plates out. And then what you can do is set a 2x on the face of it, screw it in there so you can unscrew it afterward. And then you'll only cut out the areas that you need to for your carpet. So we did it twice before we realized that we did it. Dumb mistake. We're going to fix it. And since I did it, don't do it. Last thing is going to be, why is this dark brown and why is this just light brown? If you get really close to this one, you'll see all these little depressions on the wood. And that's because they have this wood treated. It's called pressure treated wood. They've pressurized chemicals into here. Now, what it is, they've got insect resistant chemicals along with more weather resistant chemicals. We are on a second story, so it's not applicable here. But if we were on a slab, first floor concrete, like a lot of houses are here in Arizona, we would use this as our bottom plate. The other one that you can use is called green plate. It'll kind of look like a stud like this, but have a green tinge to it because that also has been treated to go on the slab. The idea is we have a lot of termites here in Arizona. It's not about if you have if you're going to get termites, it's about when you're going to get termites. I currently have termites at my house. Anyways, when you have green plate or pressure treated, termites come up, start eating the wood, and because of the pesticides in it, they die. They can't go further and destroy all the framing overhead. So on first floors, on slabs, this is what you use for your bottom plate. And I think we didn't talk about what your bottom plate and top plate is, but this is your top plate because it runs across the top. This is your bottom plate because it runs across the bottom. There you go. I I think that's about everything. We probably forgot to tell you that the standard spacing is 24 or 16 inches. We did 24 inches here because it's non-load bearing. It's really just holding drywall. So yeah, that is what we got for framing that we could show you on this project. So use the info if you've got any questions, or if you want to laugh at our goof in the comments, please do. Have a good one.